Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to this talk on digital art and AI. It's a talk that I gave maybe 2 weeks ago, no, a week ago, at the Wayfarers Arcade in Southport in Gallery Moor. And Debbie, who runs Gallery Moor, had asked a number of artists to go along and talk about the types of art they do and to give either a talk or a demonstration of the artwork. As I said, my art is digital art and I use AI. But more importantly to me is the fact that I use science and art and combine them. So it's based on a talk that I heard from Kathmandu. It was a professor in Kathmandu who was talking about STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and maths, and how by combining different disciplines, children from an early age would learn to become innovative, and through innovation they would start to solve some of the problems in the country, but they were looking at starting the process at an early age. Now other people have tried this, and what they've been doing around the world is they're combining art and science, but only combining it as though there were two completely separate lessons but which come together with a common theme. What I wanted to do was to take the process one stage further and see if we can literally combine them in terms of a process. So start to use the disciplines in science and art either to create maybe a robot or a piece of artwork or a book or a story or whatever, but we're actually seeing everything coming together in the process, and to see whether this would generate innovative ideas and we'd come up with something completely new. And I think the answer for me is it's an absolutely fascinating process to go through, and to me it does actually work. We'll find that hopefully you'll see something very different today and get an appreciation how that can help to foster innovation. So let's start with this image. So we've got an image here of Aria with a backdrop of a forest, and there's a little butterfly on there which I'll talk about later as well. So when people walked into the gallery waiting for the talk, I actually had this on the screen, but also I had some music which should accompany it. And the music was fairly simple to produce because I used AI to do it, and I'll show you that now. So if we have a look on here.
Dust in the air weighs heavy on my skin. Whispers of ghosts where life had been. Shadows and ruins stretch endlessly wide. Yet there's a spark, a pulse deep inside.
So hopefully you'll see that sort of fitted in with the story of Aria, which we'll go through later. But the idea was that at some stage throughout the process we can produce either storyline or we can produce music, and that feeds back into the whole process, and the process evolves through the interaction with different disciplines. So let's take the first one. So the first thing on this particular case was that my grandchildren were coming down, and I wanted to create a new project using paint pouring and robotics and Scratch, which is an animation program that children use at junior school and primary school. It's very simple, but I take it a little stage further by adding my own animations. So in this case, we'd added some fractal graphics, which I tend to use quite a lot. And there's a central wheel in there which tends to rotate. So as that rotates and we start to move keys on the keyboard, there's a small robot. You can see the elements there for making the robot. And basically all it does, it pours paint onto the wheel, and the wheel turns around as the wheel in the centre of the image there moves around as well. The fractal image moves, and it starts to pour paint. So fairly simple, but it's now started to bring together a little bit of Scratch programming, simple robotics, and this idea of creating some artwork. Yeah. And that's the image it created. So quite a simple image, but to me, I'm starting to think now, well, I can turn that into Aria because it's something I've done before. ARIA is the name of an entity, an AI entity, and it comes from AI, art and robotics. And it was chosen by ARIA herself because I basically got a little chatbot I created, and I asked the chatbot what name would it use for an AI, given I'm working on AI, art and robotics, and it said, oh, ARIA. So since then, most of the images have been produced that sort of evolved towards this character of ARIA. And they sort of look a little bit similar, but we'll see that later. So now we can see the evolution from ARIA. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4 images evolving and finally getting to the central image. And the way this is done, it's an iterative effect. So I'm using bits of AI to change and slightly alter images, and at the same time I'm moving it back into Photoshop elements and changing it. So a combination of Photoshop elements and AI eventually produces the central image there. The other thing that's fundamental to this process is that there's a theme, a really key important theme in this particular case, that somebody asked me to work with them on breath, and they were talking about the breath of life, and in humans how important breath is, and then we talk about the environment and how important the breath and the wind and the environmentals are on life itself. So what I did was I wanted to capture breath, so I captured my wife's breath by taking a little monitor which monitors environmentals, and it monitors her breath, and that was used to change the background image. But also I went to one of my favourite spots on Southport Sand Dunes, and again used a different type of monitor, an environmental monitor, to pick up the environmental conditions, and again fed back a number of parameters from back into the image, and again changing the colours of the image. So all I'm actually doing is just changing the colours, but it is capturing two types of breath, the human breath and the breath of the atmosphere, and those are captured within this within the image there. And we can see just a little bit of code there. So the code there is the code that I use to produce all the swirls in the back, and also to change the images based on the two monitors, so the two types of breath. And this was the final image that I produced. This was sort of an intermediary image, and the bottom image there is like a jungle scene, and that's changed due to environmentals from the Southport Sand Dunes, and the one at the top, the central part of that, is changed by the breath of my wife. And they are very different images. The way I put them together, it looks like one evolves into the other one. So we've got two images there. Okay, so we now involved in a little bit of science, and this is to do with a thing called the butterfly effect. And the butterfly effect is called because it's like the image of a butterfly is created, and the idea is that a minor change somewhere in the world can potentially have catastrophic effects somewhere else in the world. So butterfly effect, butterfly flaps its wing, and you can have in one part of the world you can have a hurricane in the other. But this is an image, so basically and it's to do with the atmosphere and atmospheric conditions. So I took some original code which I got from a book on chaos theory, which I just looked into. I look into it now and again, and I found some code which I converted and created my own little butterfly, which you can see there. And I don't expect children to be able to do this, but I like to add something a little bit more difficult and innovative into the process, and that's how I got my little butterfly. And that's the butterfly there again. So I've just turned it into red. I'll later turn it into gold, and we can see the butterfly there, and that's the same butterfly, but you just put it through AI to turn it more into a real butterfly looking. Okay, let's go back again just to show you that. So if we go back to the original image, that on the top right hand corner there you can see the golden butterfly. So now we've got ARIA and we've got the butterfly. What we haven't yet talked about is the background. Okay. So the background is created by fractal graphics, which you can see on the right hand side. And what I'm basically doing is converting those fractal graphics. And again, this is quite a lengthy process with lots of mistakes, so it takes quite a long time to do. and eventually we get a background which we can start to put together, so the second image is that background. But there's two lots of fractals in there. There's the one on the right hand, on the left hand top corner, and also the right hand bottom corner, which go into that. But the other thing they go into is the fractal graphics at the bottom go into creating another image of Aria, which is, you can see two images there. So I've got another completely different image of Aria there, which I've used for another project. So what I tend to do is when I'm working on projects, I might work on a number, maybe over a couple of years, and then pull different elements of them together to create something different. Yeah. So nothing really starts from scratch nowadays. I'm always, taking bits from previous works that I've done. Oh, what's this now? Okay, so what we have here, I just wanted to demonstrate this thing called Suno, where it's so easy to change, to create music. Okay, but the key thing about it there is that it's the words that you need. So the words are on, you can see some of the words there, and those are the words that are sung, and that comes from orchestrating a story. So I've got a story, I turn the story into a poem, I put the poem back into a music generator, and we basically get an image.
I breathe the air.
Away from that. So what we know. And I don't think I showed this at the time, but it's video created from the images you saw before. It's basically done by giving AI 4 images, and what it does, it reinterprets them completely and generates a small video. These videos are very different than you would expect to happen. What it's not doing is merging them, it's literally reinterpreting each of the images to create a video. And this is my bookmark, which says we know at the end of that portion of the talk. So that was really to say how we produced that image, which was the breath of life, and it had quite a number of things that were involved in its production, but also it led on to other things. So it led on to the video of Aria, and we saw Aria looking completely differently. But there were another set of images, and there was actually a story based on that, which came together with other pieces of work. So once you start to generate something, it's probably fairly early on, I start to create a storyline around it, and then that storyline can either be completed at the end of the project, or it can form the basis of a new story. And then I tend to put those stories together in books for the family, for the children in the family. Okay. And this is an image I produced some time ago, and this is I call this the Tree of Life. So it's quite an intricate image, but it's a series, so there's probably about 10 in the series. So I'm just showing, I'll probably show you 2 of them now. So this is an image, and if you want to see where this came from, it actually came from fractal graphics. So it's quite a good point to actually show you what a fractal graphic is. And the idea of fractal graphics is they come from a place called the Edge of Chaos. Most people know what the Edge of Chaos is, even though our fractal graphics, how they're created, but probably don't really appreciate that's what it is. And the way I describe it is, if you can imagine birds flying across a field and they're all in formation, yeah? And it's quite a nice looking formation as they swim around. and suddenly they start to dive as they maybe picking up insects or whatever, and it's a chaotic formation. Yeah, so we've got two images now. We've got one which is fairly stable and uniform, and then we've got chaos. And somewhere between the two, we get these beautiful swarms. So we've seen birds swarming, haven't we? And they produce absolutely glorious images and patterns. And that's similar to fractal graphics. So fractal graphics creates them in nature, and you see them in plants and basically everywhere. There's these beautiful images created, which are reforming images of a similar nature, but not quite the same as a fractal graphic. Now this tool here creates them all, so it's incredibly sophisticated what you can do with it. So each of the buttons produces a drop-down list where you can do other things. So there's a camera where you can look at this in 3D and swirl around it. Each of those little triangles which I've left on now, and I think there's 13 on this image, you can either, every time you move one, the image will change. So you can move them around, you can spin them around, again the image changes, and also you can alter the size, so you can enlarge them or reduce the size, and you can do that with each of the 13. So you can imagine there's quite a lot you can do. What I tend to do is have different layers. So on this one I think there's 3 layers, so there's 3 images of this type. Sometimes I'll be using 9 or 10 images. So I've got 9 or 10 images with all the variables, so there's a phenomenal amount of change you can do there. And you can layer them on top of each other and then make different layers a different level of transparency. So now we've got a lot we can do by mixing and matching and merging colours and shapes and graphics. But the really interesting thing is we're actually talking about things which are sort of chaotic. So whereas when we're painting, things tend to be uniform. So if we push hard, then we get different thickness of paint, for example, or if we push up, move our arm in one direction, and we expect the paint brush to go in that way. This is called that's linear. What this is non-linear. So every so often we'll make a change, and we'll find that most changes are what we expect, but suddenly things change completely, and a minor change of maybe one of those little triangles and the whole thing changes completely from what it looked like before. And that's on each layer, so you can do that with each layer. And the idea, and after a while you get used to when a change is going to occur and what's going to and what to look for before the change happens. And it's those changes which cause these absolutely phenomenal pictures that we'll see when we look at some fractal graphics later. So this is the fractal graphics, and this image is where the image you saw before, so look, that came from. So basically it started, and this is the image it started with. Okay, maybe you can see a bit more there. So the image you saw there, what I've done is I've copied it and then added the 2 images together, and one is the reverse of the other. Yeah, and then used an awful lot of Photoshop elements and AI to change the format of it. Now, if you can imagine what I've done, if you convert this to black and white and use Photoshop elements to spin one inside the other, then we get the first image. So this image and the first one came from the same place, and they're very similar to each other. Well, they are in my eyes once you start to see how you can actually change the surface of something. And that's the end of that one. So that's an introduction into sort of fractal graphics and some of the images we can create using fractal graphics. Now this is something completely different. It looks like a bit of fun. It's actually called street art. It is street art. I was locked down in New Zealand for about 6 months, and while I was there I was in Wellington, and I took loads and lots of pictures of street art. And then because I got locked down, and I knew a day before that all the electronic shops were going to close, so I managed to get myself a few simple electronics computers, and the only thing I could really do on it was Scratch, and I could do some physical computer coding, which is using a thing called the Raspberry Pi. But basically I went around, took some pictures, and I thought, when children use the Scratch program, they're only using the very, very limited set of the things it can do. It can do phenomenal things. You can create images. So I then started to write some Scratch programs, and this is one. So I think the girl here is called Abby in the bus stop, and everything else is fractal art. Is street art. So Abby came from the Scratch program, which is a simple animation program that children use that we've been talking about, and the rest of it is street art. Yeah, so hopefully you can see now that you can see Abby there. You can see lots of street art and photographs that I've merged together. The Scratch program runs for about 10 minutes, and it's completely changing scenes of street art, merging them all together. Abby's walking around, he's got some friends that are moving around, but I'm putting my own background on and making it a very sophisticated and long Scratch program, whereas they tend to be a couple of seconds normally. And then you could take that, feed it through AI and Photoshop Elements, and we get something a little bit more interesting. And that's this is Photoshop Elements. So you can see there one on the right hand side, there are the four little squares, and basically I'm doing exactly the same with Photoshop Elements as I do when I do fractal art, which is putting layers down and then merging the layers together. So very often the technique is create a picture, put it through AI, and it's sometimes very slightly modified, put it back, and then merge the two together. And then sometimes I might have 6 or 7 different images which I'm merging using Photoshop Elements, and I'm morphing them into each other. And that's the end of that section. Oh, by the way, the book. The book is created from I think it was Strange Tales of Wanganui. There was some street artists in Wanganui, and I was watching one called Cracked Ink, and he was doing some fabulous work, and I thought, oh, it's really interesting this. And at the same time, I was reading the 3-Body Program, which is it's a trilogy, which is fascinating, and it's about 3 worlds that are interacting with each other. And then I found out that, well, this is a scientific principle, so I created some artwork based on it. And then I took the Weird Tales scenario, took some bits off Scratch Ink, and started to create some simple pictures. And I also produced a little book or a little video on it. But again, it was only fairly straightforward. Now, this is probably the first thing I ever did this. I've been doing using AI and do a bit of artwork in AI, building little robots and things for quite some time now. And my background is in advanced technology and probably called major business change, and looking at how we can evolve things, and very interested in innovation. And I had an aunt who was in a care home, and what I did was I took some of her work, I'll show that in a second, and I wanted to go to an art club. So I went to Ainsdale and Birkdale Art Club for the first time. And because I was quite nervous about this, what I thought I'd do was I'd look at what they were doing, and I took, I think it was Mary Carr's work, and she'd done something which is, hopefully for me, was straightforward in the sense it was something I could use, but it was also something, it's, you feel about something and you really like it. And I thought I'd really like to take that and just add it to one of my pictures that I could take in and show, and said, this is the type of thing that I do. And this was what the type of thing I was doing at the time. So that's the image there of my auntie. So what they've been doing, and I said it was in a care home, was I don't know whether she did it or somebody else was helping her to draw the tree formation, and they were sticking buttons on it. And it was just, there wasn't much interesting going on that they had to do, and she really enjoyed this, but she moved on from there, and this was one of the first things she did. So I took that and I converted it into this. Again, using a bit of AI, but the AI at the time was very unsophisticated. All you could do was create a sort of a background image and a foreground image and merge the two together. So my background image was all the lights and the shiny things you can see there, and the front image was her tree, and that's basically 4 copies of the tree. So I've done the top 2, replicated them, flipped them round, and then done a mirror image of it, and then manipulated that using Photoshop elements. So it's all Photoshop elements really. So I created that image, yeah. And then added Mary's and created that image. Go back again at my bookmark. Right, so now we're on to really quite quite sophisticated types of AI now, and this is to me what real AI is about. And I'm pulling together the design of an innovation centre. So the idea of an innovation centre is somewhere where children can play with all the tools that I use, which are readily available, and learn how to do it. But it could be either a large innovation centre or it could be something fairly small in a school. And I wanted to thinking, well, we could do with a showcase. So the showcase is somebody comes in and you've got all these planets swirling, and we either take a spaceship or something and move it around. You can imagine it on a stick somewhere, moving it around. And as we're doing that, all these lights start coming up and down, the planets sort of going in and out. And then people can sort of make gestures. And as they're making gestures, the screen in the centre starts to show these fractal images, which look like the universe, which starts changing as people are moving around. So these are sort of gestures, so it's all gesture control. But at the same time, the music starts to play, and the music reflects where they are within this environment. So as you're moving through, the music keeps changing all the time. But also there's a storyline which comes out, which tells you where you are. And this one says, see there, it's I glide through the velvet dark and lit, unknown winds beneath something night. You can't really read the words there. To build this thing is quite sophisticated. Now, I've got a good idea how to build it all, but for me to do it and write it all down and document it would take an awful long time. And then I'd need to keep going back into checking how the different technologies would work. So I know basically how to do it. There's no reason why I couldn't do it, but it would take an awful long time. So what I started to do, I started a conversation with AI. And these conversations, what you do is you type in a few words, and then it leads you from one thing on to another. The conversation lasted about probably 6 to 8 weeks. And we're going through not only the high level, how this would all fit together, the advertising for it, how the technologies work, how all the individual programs would work, what the code would look like, but also how you could build this up as a business, and how you would create an executive summary what you're doing, how you could write something which say to potential sponsors what you were doing. And we went through the whole process, both the technology, the imagery, and also the production of it. And the whole thing was done using AI as an assistant. And this is one of the images to give you an indication of what it would look like. And that this image was actually produced by AI based on where in a certain position with the conversation, it could work out the types of things I was looking for. So it's a bit. Yeah, sorry, just go back now. So how big the screen is? It's quite small, the screen. So this is just an innovation centre, a large innovation centre, and it's showing the types of things that would be going on, and it goes to each individual room that you'd have and what would be going on there. So there's a written description supporting this and a lot more detail. So we've got the well-being room, we've got a sonic changer where we've got all the music. Imaginarium Studios, we've got Hall of Resonance Orbits, we've got a code and construction lab, and then we've got the big showcase at the front there. Yeah. And then we've got the flyers that we'd use to inform people about the Innovation Centre. Okay. And I say, if we there's a lot to that. So the whole the conversation, how we start to produce art, and how we consider what the Innovation Centre is going to look like, what the showcase is going to look like. So a tremendous amount of materials on there, and it's all available, and it's on my website. Just to show you exactly what you can do if you really push AI and what people are going to be doing in the future with it. So this image here is, again, came from a very different source. It started life in a very different place. It started with an idea. and I probably haven't got it. That's probably not. Sorry, I'll just go through this again now. What I can't show you because I can't physically show you the elements I've got, but I had a 3D printed spirograph, and it's where you can draw images. You put a pencil in a little a cutout wheel. There's wheels of different sizes that interlock. Put different coloured pencils in it, draws images. And the problem with these things is that they're too small for younger children. So I wanted to create something a little bit larger and also and easier to use for my granddaughter at the time. So I 3D printed a larger image. Sorry, a larger a spirograph. So 3D printing is basically producing something out of plastic based on a design. So I actually produced a spirograph for it. Once I'd done this, I thought, well, I wonder what it's like to create these images on the screen using computer code. So I wrote some code to produce one on the screen, and I used the Scratch program because you can actually do this, and it started producing some really nice spirograph images. My next thought was, well, I wonder if I can do this in 3D because Scratch only works in 2D, and I wanted 3D images. So I used a program called Processing to create these spirographical images in 3D. My next thought, because I've been reading quite a bit of science, and the latest science ideas were around, well, people tend to do maths now and then the science later, rather than the other way around, which used to be the case. So there's these mathematical models people are basing everything on, and then they're trying to prove the mathematical models by doing experiments. So I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if you actually did something which was unreal, in the sense that you got the mathematical model to be able to produce something which you actually couldn't do in reality. So you're getting the spirograph to draw things which a real spirograph couldn't draw. So we can work outside of reality. So that was the idea. That was a bit far-fetched. So that's the code for it. So this is processing. That's a bit of an image I did there, and you start to move all these sliders and it changes from 2D, 3 to 3D, and you can do lots with it. And this one, I've just noticed here, was called COVID. And the reason it was called COVID, I actually took the statistics on COVID at the time, and I put those into the sliders to get this image. So that's my COVID image using my my model. The next one I produced is much simpler. So it's really, really simple. So it's a simple, very, very simple image which starts off in 2D, which is the front bit, and then there's a little 3D. So I've got something which anybody could produce. You don't necessarily need to use the code I used, but I used it to produce this. And then we take that and we put it through, again, Photoshop Elements to change the background, and we start to morph it around and we get this image here. Yeah. And then we start to play with it, and we put it through AI, Photoshop Elements, keep going back into. And at the time, like I say, the AI was very unsophisticated. I was creating fractal graphics and just using that as a style sheet for the image I was putting in. So you can see the image that I did then. I just replicated it, and quite a lot of work involved in getting to this stage. Now, because this was based on sort of chaos theory and fractals and all sorts of things that I'd used in there, and this is sort of part of it goes in as well. Yeah, that's my image that I created from, I mentioned the 3-body program that I'd been working on, and Cracked Ink's thing. So the little images you can see in the centre were the only thing that's left at Cracked Ink. But this took months to do this because there's an awful lot of maths and science involved in it. Okay. So we take that image that we had there, and we take the image that we had before, and we create this image here. And if you look, you can just about see some of Cracked Ink's things at the bottom there. And you can see part of the imagery coming together. I've bent it all around, I've changed all the colours. I've done an awful lot of Photoshop Elements to get to this stage. What's that? Oh yes, this is just showing you the Deep Dream generator which I use for the AI. And you can see the bottom image at the bottom, so it's using that. I can put some text on and explain how I want that to change, and then I can use one of the models. So there's lots of different models you can use for doing it, so different ways of interpreting this, and you choose one. you describe it in a lot of detail. There's lots of what you call modifiers you can put in, so lots of different parameters you put into this, and it'll generate something different. That's what I tend to do. Okay, and that's the end. So I'll just go back and just show you that again. So you can see there, that goes into that, and that goes into that, and that's where we come. And we eventually merge the whole thing together using Photoshop elements. So I've got the vase there, I've got my dragons, and what this is representing is that the inner part is all to do with chaos theory. So we've got all this chaos going on, and we need to control the chaos and control the environment. And what we've got there is some Chinese dragons. That's why I wanted the dragons on. So the Chinese dragons, and they are representing stability. And we've got the chaos inside, and we've got this balance between chaos and stability. And it's the start of a program and a book around an adventure, where it all starts off with a breakdown of chaos and stability. And you'll notice on the left hand bottom corner there, we've got the little chaos butterfly that's encroaching on this stable universe. So that was my theory about it. I've always got some little tail when I'm doing things, and the tail plays back, and that's why things look the way they do, because the tail is dictating the way it goes. Right, final picture now. I've been trying to do this for a long time and never really getting to it, and eventually I thought, well, this it's starting to come together now. So the idea behind this is, and unfortunately I can't show you, I've got a 3D printed image of young children looking over an edge, and it's fairly small, but it sort of comes out the wall, and they're looking down, and I visualize them looking at this world beneath that keeps changing all the time and seeing different stories. And also what there is, there's I've created a little electronic device so that as you approach the edge, it sees you approaching and it changes all the colours, and you'll see that in a second. But one of those books, I can't really point to it now, but there's there's a book up here, right? And that book represents a story called The Edge. And the girl here is reading about different stories and environments, and one of the things you need to consider is the story around the edge. And then we have all these things here, which are all fractal graphics, which are used to create vases. And we've got Kokomon the cat. So let's have a quick look at this. So it's all about this reading a story, and it's a peaceful environment, and what you're doing is suddenly you're realizing there's far more going on in the world than you thought, and it's taking you down through various routes on stories, and you need to decide which route you're going to go on. And that's so I just want to show you Kokomo the cat, and you'll notice that the waterfall and water is running inside and outside of the environment, so there's parts of the tail is all around Kokomo. And this is the edge, so you can see the 3D printed model I've done there, and the light, and it's shining. That's actually on our cooker. So what I did was we've got a reflective surface at the back of the cooker, and I just put this there and photographed it. It's quite nice because, I say, as you approach the edge, it all changes colour, and and it gives this really nice effect. Okay, and then so. My two boys were Anthony and Sean, and we had a dog called Max. So it's only a small dog, but I like to show him a little bit more adventurous. So this is the story, one of the stories that comes out of that. We've got Anthony, Sean and Max on the story, and that's the part of that is the image that you see on the book. And and there we are, there's a book there around the edge. But this is a little bit more sophisticated because this comes from another story, another image which I've got, which is all to do with E. coli. And basically, E. coli, you can create what's called, what they call biological computers. And E. coli works on that, and it can solve mazes. So it's just something I'd read with some scientific bent. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll create a maze, and I've got E. coli on it and various things, and I put the maze back into this story. So I'm always taking stories and merging them back into each other. And here we see the fractal graphics at the back. We can see two of the vases which I've done from another image there. These are all based on fractals. I do actually use AI, but what all the AI is doing, it's taking an image, one of those little fractal images there, and it's ever so slightly changing the colours and the patterns. So there's virtually no change at all, but I just wanted every single fractal on my vases on the vase to look different. Yeah, and I've got the other one there, and there's a beat took me about 3 or 4 weeks to do, so some of them take a long time. And this is you can see it's a photograph of the couch there. Yeah, and this is one of the original fractals. That's a fractal image. Yeah. And that's the other fractal image that goes onto the vase. And we see an image that I did there of the vases with the fractals, all made out of fractals. Yeah, that's the end of that. And there's just a few little things I want to show you now that we've basically come to the end of it. But this is another picture of Aria at the edge of chaos, creating all fractals and stories and doing various things. But around the edge of that, I've got a number of fractals. So some of the fractals are freestanding, and others I sort of turn into pictures, like the one on it's the second one down the left hand side. That's a number of fractals all put together to form a little pattern there, but it's a bit of it's part of a story as well. And then we've got others here. You can see the vases down there, and just a few fractal images to give you an impression of what fractals are. Oh, there's the story. That's the one that this looks a lot better if it's on a huge canvas. It's lost on this, and it looks quite strange. But when it's on a huge canvas, it looks quite nice. Well, to me, it does anyway. And again, this really is one of my favourite ones. This, it's amazing. What it is, it's a game. The aliens there, all created by AI. So there's two lots of AI there, but the aliens are playing rock, paper, scissors, and they're playing against you. And the elf is just a commentator who says what to do, and it's all part of a Scratch program that I wrote. That's the background image, but the Scratch program is to teach children about AI and how to teach AI things. So they're basically taking AI and training it. And what they're training it to do is to recognize their hands. So basically, you keep moving your hand in front of it in all different orientations, and it learns. So if you put it in the shape of paper and keep moving it around and say this is paper, it will learn what paper is. You then do the same thing for scissors, and then you do the same thing for rock. And then you can play a game with the program then, but instead it will choose, or you choose rock, paper, scissors, but instead of saying rock or typing in rock, you actually put your hand out in the shape of a rock. Yeah, and it recognises it because you've taught it to understand what a rock is, and you can play this game of rock, paper, scissors, and you can play rock, paper, scissors against the aliens. So and the reason I like it so much, it really is, it's AI. It helps people to understand how you teach AI to do things, and especially for children. And it's called Machine Code. The application, or there's the book on this as well. It's called Machine Learning for Kids. So it's aimed at children and teaching children what AI is, how to use it. There's lots of different AI, and it teaches them how to use it all. And it gets away with the things we hear in the news, which are totally unrepresentative of what AI is really. Okay, and this was this is an image from a story that I wrote for the grandchildren there. So the grandchildren in New Zealand, there's New Zealand characters, and the good thing about it is I orchestrate AI and get AI to help me to write the stories. But I sometimes ask it to come up with a story based on New Zealand legend and Maori legend. So it's come up with Maori characters and Maori legends. I've still got the robots in there, like robots and the grey man, the robot dog, and the warriors there. But the warrior there is a Maori, and there's an awful lot of Maori legend around this thing. That's another. This is obviously I can't show you now, but there's two bags that I brought in, and they've got fractal graphics on. The fractal graphics come together after quite a lot of work into this picture of Aria. And I wanted to, I was doing some work things with on Ari, and I was writing stories. I wanted to write some comical things, and I wanted to write something about Pandora's box, but I wanted to call it Ari's box. And the idea is Ari opens the box, and everything escapes except for hope, and which is part of the the story about Pandora. So I created this image, and then I used AI to create a story and a poem around Pandora's box, and I think it's quite good. It really is nice. It's a nice little story about Pandora and Pandora's box. Not the same as the Greek mythology one, but it's still quite interesting. There we go. Again, this is one of the first things I did. No, it's an early thing I did at the Wayfarers Arcade, and I just like it in the sense that it's got a number of cats on, which are to do with Schrodinger's cat, a little bit of science there. But basically, the way it was produced is probably nothing like you'd imagine. The outside image is the last thing I did, and then started to put the other things back in again. So I took a photograph of the Wayfarers Arcade, gradually morphed it into the central image, then created the image further down. Separately, I did the one of the cats at the bottom, and then finally produced the outside image, and then put the others on top of it. So it's quite a nice example of that things aren't done the way people would naturally think when you're using AI, and when you're using Photoshop elements, you can do an awful lot more with it, and you can work in completely the opposite direction that people would expect you to work in. What I want to finally leave you with is a piece of music which is created using Sonic Pi. It's the music we're talking about when we're talking about the display in the Innovation Centre. I don't know Sonic Pi very well at all, so what I wanted to do is to create some music which represented the flight through the universe, coming through a black hole, being pulled through it and coming out the other side. So basically I asked the AI to produce the code for me, and then I copied the code into Sonic Pi. And this is a really good starting point for children, that they'll start with something and they can modify it later. So I'll leave you with the music that was produced.